Nayas Chagiga, Perek Aleph, Chapter 1, Mishna Ches, Mishna 8. We're in the middle of the Mishnah. Now, we began, the Mishnah said that when it comes to the mitzvah or the law, the halacha of Het and Nedarim, about annulling vows, the Mishnah describes that as floating in the air without what to rely on. There's very little scriptural source for this halacha, for this law, and it is primarily based, and without the Torah Shabbat Peh, without the Orah law telling us that such a halacha exists, we'd never be able to know it otherwise. That was the first part of the Mishnah. The next part of the Mishnah were laws of the Torah that have more scriptural basis, more scriptural support, but again, they have many details to them that have no scriptural support, and again, you need the Torah Shabbat Peh, the Orah law, to teach you that. And the Mishnah describes that category, or those halachas, those laws, as mountains that are hanging by a hair. They have very little scriptural support, maybe more than the annulling of vows. But again, they're like mountains. They have many details and many laws to them, but not too much scriptural source for those laws. So the first example was the laws of Shabbos, which we went through yesterday. That was referring to the fact that we know the Torah tells us that malacha, that there is malacha, there is activity that's forbidden to do. But the example that was given about the fact that there's so many laws that we wouldn't be able to know on our own, although there is more scriptural source, was the concept of malachas machsheves, purposeful labor. That was yesterday. The next example was chagigos. The next example of laws that are like mountains hanging by a hair are chagigas, the laws of the chagiga carbon. And I mentioned yesterday, this is the whole reason why this mission is here, because our Mishnah, our Masechta is chagiga, and this concept is relevant to chagiga, and therefore it's mentioned here. Now, what is the issue here by chagiga? So let me read to you from the notes. Now, again, we're talking about the requirement to bring a carbon chagiga. When you come to the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, every individual has an obligation to bring a carbon chagiga. Where is the source for the carbon chagiga? And the answer is, it comes from a pasuk that reads, "V'chagaisem oisai chag laHashem." Literally translated, that means, and you shall celebrate it as a festival for Hashem. And what does celebrating mean? What does it mean to celebrate? Does it mean, one second, by reading the pasuk, would you know what that means? Would you know that it means to bring a carbon chagiga? No, not necessarily. The way that we know that the verse also refers to the requirement of bringing the offering is deduced only from a similar terminology used in a verse in the prophets that discusses bringing offerings. That's how we know. That's how we know that when the Torah says "V'chagaisim you shall celebrate," it means with a carbon chagiga, based on a pasuk in Nevi'im, in the prophets, that uses this terminology for bringing a carbon. All right. Now, can we learn mitzvahs out of the words of the prophets? No, we cannot. All we can do from the words of the prophets is use it as a way of helping us understand what the Torah is telling us. But again, so you have a scriptural source, but again, not one that you necessarily know to apply without Torah Shabbat Peh, without the Torah telling us that this is so. So that's the example of chagigas. The next example, again, of a mitzvah that is called a mountain that is hanging by a hair, are me'ilos. Now, what are me'ilos? Me'ilah is the law that if something is consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash, whether it be consecrated as a sacrifice, whether it be consecrated, its value be consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash, like a vessel that you donate to the Beis Hamikdash. In that situation, you may not have personal benefit from it. Not allowed to. Now, the Torah says, if you unintentionally use that consecrated object, then you have to bring, that's called me'ilah. That's called the law of me'ilah, in which you have to bring a sacrifice, you have to pay, but that is very specific to doing it unintentionally. If you intentionally went ahead and used this thing, it's forbidden to do. However, the laws of me'ilah, bringing a carbon, and the other laws involved don't apply. So here is now, okay, so fine. That's what the Torah says. That's not Torah Shabbat Peh. The Torah says that. Now, so what are we talking about here that you need Torah Shabbat Peh for? You need it for the following. If, let's say, I tell somebody else, I have this consecrated object, and I tell you to use it for me. let's say there is a bowl that was consecrated for the Beis HaMikdash, and I tell you to fill it up with water for me. So you are my agent in doing this. Now, I am telling you to do something wrong, right? Because you're not allowed to use it. Typically, the rule is, Ein shliach ledavar aveira. There's no such thing as creating an agent to commit a sin. That we say that when the agent commits the sin, whatever it may be, to say that, okay, you sent me to do it, so it's your responsibility. No, we say to the agent, you know better. You know who to listen to. You shouldn't have done it. However, the Gemara in Kedushin says that Me'ila is an exception. It's an exception. It's based on, there's a source to say that it's an exception. If I tell you to go ahead and use this consecrated object, I can be responsible. Only though, and this is where it gets more complicated, only though if both you and I don't realize that we're using a consecrated object. If both of us are unintentional, then the halacha is I, the sender, will now be responsible for what my agent did. But let's say it comes out that I, the sender, all of a sudden realize, hey, I consecrated that. So you, the sender, realize that this is consecrated. And the agent doesn't know it's consecrated. Guess who's liable now? Guess who's responsible now? The agent. Because I realize that this is consecrated. And the assumption is that I don't want him to do it anymore. So it comes out, so he's not my shliach, he's not my agent anymore. And it doesn't matter. But the bottom line is, I don't want him to do it anymore. He's not considered my agent anymore. And therefore, he landed up unintentionally using this consecrated object. So it comes out that based on my knowledge, it'll make a difference as to whether he's liable or not. There is no way for you to know that on your own. This is all part of Torah Shabbal Peh. And this is the mountain that's hanging by the hair, because there's so much that this is already such a novel idea, and such a novel idea that it's called a mountain. But again, the scriptural source for that you don't have. You have the Me'ila has more scriptural source than the annulment of vows mentioned before. But again, there may be more support for the actual halacha, for the actual law in itself, in its essence. However, this kind of detail, which is a very novel idea and has a lot of consequences to it, that's what it means. It's like a mountain that's hanging by a hair. That is the example of Me'ilas. And that the Mishnah is that. So let's just read it again from the beginning. Heter nedarim parachim ba'ader. The number to vows is flying in the air. Ve'en lamamashi yismoichu, and they don't have what to rely on. Hilchai Shabbos Chagigas VaMe'ilas, the laws of Shabbos and the laws of the Chagiga sacrifice and the law of Me'ilah, of using a consecrated object. Harehem kahararim atluyim basara. They're like mountains hanging by a hair. Sheimik remuat. There's little scriptural source. Balachas merubais, but many laws to it. Okay, we're going to stop here because the next part again has a lot of details to it, and we'll Mr. Hashem finish it tomorrow. So it'll be the first time in a long time. It took us to do 3 days to do one Mishnah. Okay, Chofetz Chaim. All right, now, one has to be very careful. Let's say it's well known about a person who committed something wrong in his youth. He robbed a bank. Everybody knows he robbed the bank in his youth. But now he's a law-abiding citizen. Everybody knows what he did in the past, but now he's law-abiding. Or it's well known that his fathers, his ancestors, did not behave properly, and he does not follow them. They were all mafiosos, and he didn't do that. And anything similar where what you want to say about him, although it's well known, he has no responsibility for it. You may not now go and tell others and try to put him down in front of others. And therefore, anybody who now transgresses this and tells this over in front of anyone, even not in front of him, and again, you're doing it because you're just kind of spreading this interesting information that puts him down. Even if he's not going to add anything, he won't embellish it or add anything at all. He falls under the category of people who speak lashon hara will not receive the divine presence in Olam Haba, in the world to come. But again, this is talking about, so we're saying that even if there is a concept that something that is well known that isn't lashon hara, if you say it over, that's only when the person that what's being said about is responsible for what's being said. It's truly something that he has to own. But in situations where you may know something about his past or about his parents that have nothing to do with him because he doesn't behave the way anymore, or again, he's not responsible for what his parents did, and now you're saying it over, that would constitute lashon hara, even though it may be very well known. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.